So what I'll take you through today is, as he said, the table grape story of how we basically were very focused on domestic, and because of the supply that we had oversupply, so we had to diversify and had to find other industries or other markets. And we went about the process of looking very much at export markets. So in terms of just a brief overview of our industry to start with, there are about 900 table grape growers throughout Australia. The growers are predominantly second generation family farmers. The majority of table grape growers are in Sunraysia. Second generation, I said, probably Italian table grape growers. The Italian table grape growers are very passionate in their attitude towards growing fruit, particularly table grapes. Basically, the good growers will walk up and down the rows every day and nearly talk to their berries, and they'll just watch the growth and the quality and the product of their product every day, and as a result of that, the quality has been now regarded as one of the world's best. Having said that, there are very, very small farmers. They're only, say, 20 hectares, 50 acres. We have very few large growers, table grape growers in Australia. There might be half a dozen, there might be more than, say, 150 hectares in size. So they're very much value orientated. And the good thing about our industry also is that in recent times, the family, the kids have been on the farm, they've gone away, been educated, gone to university, etc., and they're now coming back to the farm. They can see a future in table grapes, and that's really pleasing. So the succession planning for our industry is quite good. And as I mentioned, due to the oversupply domestically, well then we've looked for other markets. So we've gone to export, and thankfully for us, we've had some significant gains. So just a brief production synopsis of our industry. You can see there from 2010-11, we had a fairly down year, and that was a year where we needed change. And that's where we started embarking on really ramping up our exports. And we've now got to the stage where, say, we were 25% exports in 2010-11, to now we're nearly 60% of exports that we actually do from our industry. So there's been significant growth in our export industry. But what does that mean for the farmers in terms of farm gate? Well, this graph sort of shows it all very clearly. Again, 10 and 11 was our down year, and that's when we really started to ramp up. So we've had nearly, as it says there, 300% increase in returns to our growers, or export returns to our growers since 10-11. And the average value that they're getting per box now is about $3.30 per box, or $3.30 per kilo, or $33 a box, so 10 kg boxes. We send about 16 million boxes a year overseas of grapes, 6,000 containers. So that's a hell of a lot of exports that we do. And when you consider that the cost of production is around about $20 thereabouts, and they're getting on average $33 a box, that's a fair return to the growers when you consider that the average farmer would probably produce about 50,000 boxes. So I'm going to let you work out the sums from there. But how do we get there? And this was a fairly long journey, and we really had to fight the establishments to get there. So in 2003, in terms of China, we sent an application into AQSIQ, and it basically sat on the desk. Now, I didn't start with the ATGA until 2005, but basically nothing happened once we sent that application in. We were naive in terms of market access, and so was the rest of most of the commodity groups. There's very few commodities that had access into other countries. Citrus was one, and table grapes were starting the process. But what we did, though, in terms of getting access and fast tracking, is that we created relationships with overseas countries, particularly with AQSIQ and with the Department of Agriculture. There wasn't a lot of interaction with the Department of Agriculture back then, and that's what we created. So in May 2006, we had a board meeting, and I basically said to the board, you're not going to get market access sitting in Mildura. We have to get out and about. You have to go overseas. You have to start talking to the overseas counterparts. So we had an objective then to become known to the Chinese authorities. So we went overseas, and we spoke to, and we created those relationships with the people who were making the decisions. So, and we also at the time we enlisted, I don't know if anyone knew him or not, but Dr. Bin Lu, who worked for the department. He's Chinese, and he opened the doors for us. We basically said that we wanted to have meetings with AQSIQ, and Bin was able to set those meetings up, even though the Department of Agriculture thought that we would not be able to do that. So This was an informal meeting with AQSIQ. We were able to go there and sit down, and we were able to have a meeting with them. We sent over our pest list to them, but they didn't respond for at least 2 years. But then we were able to get them up and running, and we were able to get that pest list looked at, and we suggested to biosecurity that we wanted to attend the next bilateral meetings. Okay, so what we did then was that at that formal meeting, China basically said, okay, we'll look at it, and then eventually at the next bilat, China, after 2 years, presented us with a list of pests of disease that were of concern to them, and there was initially 26 of them, and we were then able to get that list quickly down to 14, of which 4 were of a major concern. We also said to BA that we wanted to attend further bilateral meetings to progress the market access application, of which back then industry weren't even in the room. We weren't even allowed to go anywhere near that. So that was another further process that we did. So from there, we came back, we found out from BA exactly what was needed to be done to gain market access. So we did what I call targeted research and development. So rather than just go and do research and development for the sake of doing that, we actually targeted what we needed to gain market access. And at the same time, we wanted to design that R&D in a format that would be acceptable by China. Too often people would do R&D, and it was great outcomes, etc., but it wasn't designed for market access. So that's one of the issues that we had to come across. So we made sure that we produced that R&D in the format that hopefully China would accept firsthand, rather than present it to China. China would come back and say, no, we need further information, etc. So we went along those lines. The relationship we had with AQSIQ fast-tracked that as well. The other thing we did was, in terms of trying to get on side with AQSIQ, was that we found out who was going to be the decision makers in terms of getting access for table grapes. So once we knew that, we then sent out a personal invitation to those people to come to Australia, outside of Biosecurity Australia. And that caused a bit of concern with BA. We were summoned to Canberra. We were sat down in a room, and they were asked what our procedure was, what our objectives were, and we had to explain to Canberra what was going on. Canberra reluctantly said, okay, you will be allowed to bring them out, which we thought was a bit strange, but that's what we did. So what we did was that we treated it as an unofficial visit. So we put them on a houseboat in Mildura. We treated them as like they were the same hospitality that we get in China. We gave them the hospitality back in Australia. So the objective there was for these people who were going to make the decisions to gain a first-hand knowledge of the table grape process, our picking, packing, our processing, our quality control, our pest monitoring, and everything else that was regarded in terms of the complete process from bud burst to harvest. These people, in an informal way and without biosecurity honing on our backs and sort of over our shoulder, etc., and they gained a thorough knowledge of the industry in an informal situation. We also took them to Gosford to have a look at the fruit fly control when Gosford was running that program up there on Q-Fly. We took them through that whole process, and they gained a thorough understanding of our cold disinfestation treatment as well. Now, remember, that was all in an informal process with the decision makers in China. Then after, there was a hiatus of about 2 years between bilats, but eventually we were working in between with letters back and forth. Because of the relationship that we created, I was able to ring AQSIQ direct and have a chat to them. They were a little bit reluctant to do that at first, but then they understood where we were coming from. Canberra didn't know this, of course. If Canberra knew about this, they'd probably be upset, but we were able to do that. Eventually we got to the stage where the Chinese sent out an audit team to go through our processes in an official capacity. One of the things that we wanted to push very strongly was for the Chinese to accept the way that we actually operate in table grapes, and that is that we have moved from shed packing to field packing. Now, by doing that, the growers would probably be saving $2 to $3 a box per box, which is a lot of money. And the Chinese were very, very reluctant to do that. At one stage they said, look, you've got the boxes on the ground, ants, dirt, anything can move into it, you need to do something other than that. And one of the growers, when they were doing this audit, went and got a old dried fruit dip tin, put that on the ground and put the box on top of that. He said, what'd that do? And the Chinese sort of nodded their head and said, oh, okay. But we had to fight very, very hard to get them to accept the way that we actually, our process was on table grapes. Eventually we got a protocol that accepted all of that, and everyone in the industry was pleased. And whenever we negotiate any protocols, we always look at it for Australia-wide, so it's not just Sunraysia. So anyone from Queensland and Western Australia could comply with our protocol. So all our growers were happy that we got this protocol. Eventually we got it in 2010. So from our application in 2003 through to when we really ramped it up in, say, 2006, it took 4 years of hard work to actually get it. And you could argue that it has set now the precedent for other commodities in terms of getting access into countries, in the sense that they do go over and they do go to the biolats, they do go over and see the equivalent of, say, BA in those countries in, say, Japan, Korea, or China, and so on. So it has set the tone, or the process, if you like, in terms of how you gain market access now. I know with summer fruit, they've been trying now for 14, 15 years to get access into into China. They're very close, exceptionally close. But again, they have now, in the last 4 or 5 years, done the same thing as well. They've been over there and they've interacted with the Chinese a hell of a lot. And hopefully there's going to be some good news soon. We got the protocol, that was fine. But at the same time, China was negotiating to get apples into Australia. That was at the same time as the World Expo over in China. It was announced on the 30th of June, which, if apple growers are here, I'm sure they know all about that. I don't know, I was actually there when it was had the announcement made. And then when that was made, Australia said to China, well, here is a work plan, here's a detailed step-by-step process of how you will import your apples into Australia. As a result of that, China said, fine, bang, here's a work plan for table grapes. So China is very much tit for tat, so to speak. What we do for them, they'll do for us. So we ended up with this work plan. And the work plan wasn't too bad, but it was a guide for the industry and for the growers to follow. And it was very strict. And if you didn't adhere to that, well then, obviously the consequences were you couldn't send that consignment to Japan. So we eventually got access into China. It took 7 years, which was, in relative terms of getting access, very quick. And it was because of the proactive work that we did in terms of creating those relationships with those overseas countries. Now, to actually do that, the industry had spent close to $4 million, or $4 million on targeted R&D work that we said. The major concern for China obviously was fruit fly, but having taken them to Gosford and had seen the cold disinfestation work, they had a good understanding of that, so they accepted our science. But the other work that we did was as listed there. So we were proactive also in terms of, because the pest list that we got from China listed a lot of other flies, a lot of other fruit flies. And at the time, no work had ever been done other than on Q fly or med fly. So we proactively looked at the relative cold tolerance of med fly and Q fly. The reason why we did that is because the USDA still believe Q fly is more cold tolerant than med fly, and yet the work that we've done proved the other way around. So we had that up our sleeve to do that. We looked at a market analysis, so we did some intelligence in terms of the market itself in China. We did develop that pest list that we sent to them. We did the cold disinfestation on the fruit fly, which is, again, close to $1 million. We did a lot of research on the export opportunities into Asia, and that was to give back to our growers, so that when we got access, the growers were ready and knew where to go. Neohumoralis, lesser fruit fly, no work had been done. I still think it's the only work that's been done on Neo, which we have that data. Vapor-mate, we did Vapor-mate because we wanted an alternative to methyl bromide. And we did the Vapor-mate trials in Mildura. It does work. Growers still use it, but it doesn't kill fruit fly, but it does kill everything else in our industry. There's others there. Light brown apple moth. Light brown apple moth is a major concern for not only Japan, for China, but Japan and Korea, particularly Korea. So we have that data package. Again, attendance at all the biolats. We commissioned DPI back then, as it were, to do a list of all known pests within our industry. And the big killer to get access in Japan was that Japan require verification of the cold treatment, And again, because they believe under the USDA that med fly is more cold tolerant than Q fly, well, then we had to do the work over in WA, captive audience, monopoly, they charged us $1.5 million. So there was a lot of money spent, but it was all targeted for R&D, targeted R&D to get market access. As a result of having that, if you like, in our top drawer, when we applied to get access into Japan and Korea, we just went to the top drawer and said, bang, here it is. And we gained access to Japan and Korea within 4 or 5 years. We're able to, every time they were asked a question, we're able to present all the information in one hit. And basically it was just a case then for Japan and Korea to analyse the information that we supplied to them. And basically it was all there in a format that would be acceptable for market access. At the same time as well, we did the same, if you like, innovative approach to gaining market access. I constantly went over to Japan and Korea. I become good relations. I've created great relationships with the powers that be, say in MPQS in Korea and with MAF in Japan. I use the agricultural counsellors in those countries. They are beneficial. They will help, and that you can use them particularly if there's any issues or concerns, even post-access. I know that a couple of times we've had containers held up in various places. I'll just ring the agricultural counsellors in those countries and they'll sort it out very quickly. We also did other things such as ministerial visits. Back then it was with Tony Burke, but we've done it with Barnaby Joyce and so on. It all adds up to creating that relationship again so that when there is an issue or there is a problem, well then we can, we've got that contact there. I know that when we, with China in the first 1 or 2 years, we had an issue with containers and inspectors. I basically rang AQSIQ on Christmas Day because we had something happening that next day. Wang Yiyu, who was the director at the time, basically answered the phone. So that relationship that was created certainly helped in terms of resolving problems. Okay, so we've got access, 3 countries, but that's not the end of the story. As I mentioned before, we worked very, very hard to get China to accept our way of picking and packing. So we've got field packing. Okay, that was great. But from the growers' point of view, there was total complacency there. The growers just went out and just did what they normally do. They didn't adhere strongly to the protocols. They become very complacent. They had an attitude where, oh, well, if China doesn't accept it, we'll just go through Hong Kong. What happened was that the growers, in terms of field packing, just went out there and picked and, as I said, didn't adhere to abuse the protocol, and they did. They just didn't care less about what the protocol said. We'll still do what we've been doing, as we've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years. The end result was that, well, first of all, in terms of the Chinese themselves, the first year when we only sent about, because we got access in March, we only sent about 30, 40 containers that year. We heard nothing from China. We had a meeting with Canberra and they said China have got some concerns with contamination in the consignments. I mean, that's the first we'd heard of it. I said, well, what are the contaminations? And they said, oh, well, there was a bit of dirt and ants and leaf matter and so on. And yet we hadn't heard about that throughout the season. So everyone thought it was okay. The next year, there was a bilat in November, and 5 minutes to go at the end of the bilats, China basically said to biosecurity at the time, oh, by the way, we're sending out inspectors for table grapes this year. And that was it. No discussion on it or anything else like that. So in that following year, 14 inspectors came out from China. When the inspectors come out from China, you can only come out for 30 days at a time. 4 of them came out per hit, and of course industry had to pay. The cost of the industry that year about 150 grand. In that year though, the growers continued to do what they did the previous year and basically just continued with their process. 1 in 3 containers that were inspected failed the consignment, failed the inspection. So there was 353 consignments or containers put up for inspection to go to China, and only 228 passed. So there's a 33% failure rate. So if you're an overseas country, you're nervous about the fact that you've signed a protocol, the first time ever that you've accepted a protocol that insists on field packing, whereas every other country that's got access to China, such as Chile and the USA, etc., all do shed packing. So the next thing China did was suspend us. Now, I'll just quickly go through some of these, but these are just some of the photos that I took while I observed the inspections of what was in the boxes of table grapes. And bear in mind that they had to be clean, the boxes off the ground, no leaf matter, no dirt, no pests, no insects or anything. That was the red blue beetle. That was a box that was presented for China. So you've got a plastic liner, you've got the box, you've got a plastic liner, the grapes go inside the plastic liner. That's what the inspector found. A few little grubs, etc. Again, more leaf matter. There was a spider, another spider. I think that was spider eggs. They were ants. That was inside the box again. That was on the bottom of the box again, clean, supposed to be off the ground. There was a bunch that was mealybug infected. That's just obviously the Chinese inspectors. So the end result was China suspended us. So we worked so hard to get this protocol, then China suspended us. The next 9 months was basically nearly every second day there was consultation with myself and DA, and we're trying to go back and forth with to China to try and get reinstatement. And it was exceptionally hard. To get reinstatement, the industry had to accept major concessions. And basically what we got down to is that we accepted those concessions because we wanted trade to recommence, we didn't want to stop it. And the major concession was basically getting back to what China wanted in the first place, and that is that we had to move to shed packing. And we made that decision basically without consultation with the growers, because if we went to the growers, they'd say no. But so as the ATGA, as a board, or whatever, their market access committee, we basically said we need to accept this to get the trade back up and running. At the same time, we also introduced other procedures and processes in place to get the protocol back in. There was compulsory IPM training for growers. There was a presentation from DPR and myself about the protocol and so on, and there was compulsory grower registration. The department also will conduct pre-harvest audits. They'll do that, and then that's in place now for every industry that's going to get access to China. They audit our packhouse facilities. We introduced what was called an export eligibility inspection, and if you like, that was the forerunner to the now authorised officer system that's in place now. So if you fail this AO inspection, which was not with Chinese inspectors, that container wouldn't be put up for consignment for the Chinese, so they wouldn't know about it. So it was one way of maybe doing a pre-check before the proper check itself. And I've got DA to do unannounced audits throughout the year on growers that I think that may be abusing the system again. So they'll walk on a property and they'll do an unannounced audit. In fact, this year they actually suspended 2 or 3 growers. If the growers didn't comply with the new requirements, the grower was suspended. If they had 3 consignments that failed inspections, well, then they were suspended from the program altogether. So it's a fairly decent penalty if you didn't comply. Okay, other market improvement initiatives and innovation. Table grapes have always put their hand up when it comes to trying to improve market access. We did that with the Philippines in terms of in-transit cold treatment. And now every industry can go to the Philippines under in-transit cold treatment. We've done it this year with Thailand onshore cold treatment facilities, so that they came into major table grape growers and other facilities. We haven't heard back from Thailand yet, but it took us 4 years for Thailand to come out to do that, so we put our hand up for that. And China onshore cold treatment is happening, and we've been talking very strongly to China about methyl bromide. When I was over there last time, they said, how can we get access for other provinces to come to Australia? I said, you need to use methyl bromide. You need to fumigate because they've got so much pest or so much disease over there. China's now looking at considering that, which is great for us because it's a two-way street. We want methyl bromide to go to China. We get that, well, then we've got air freight. If we can get air freight to China, there's another $30, $40, $50 million worth of exports. Okay. We also do inbound trade missions. We handle around 20 to 25 per year, of which some of them are in conjunction with the department, which is great, and we work closely with them. We also have introduced this new online export registration system. It has a process of streamlining the process, and eventually it'll lead to cost savings to the growers. And basically it just collects all their data, and what they end up with is a detailed map like that, which shows each patch that's registered for China, shows where the light brown apple moth traps are, an entry point for the DA inspection, and it's all electronic. And as well as that, it can do pest monitoring. That's electronic as well. DA have access to this, so they can sit in their office in Canberra or in South East Melbourne and see exactly what the grower's doing in terms of pest monitoring. If the grower's not doing it, well then they'll suspend them through email system, etc. So it's all automated and it's all electronic. We do international promotion. We do a lot of international promotion. This is the launch that we did in Korea. In the middle there is the ambassador. So we get the ambassadors involved, the Australian Embassy involved. Huge publicity in Korean paper itself, and that's the first for any commodity group to do that. That was a launch in Japan. So where it's all ended up. This is the actual export graph that we've done for grapes. Hong Kong, China is our biggest market, but this year we've been pushing very, very strongly to go from Hong Kong, grey trade, into mainland China. We send maybe 2,000 containers to Hong Kong, China per year. Previous years it's been maybe 1,800, 200 China mainland. This year it's probably going to be about 1,400 mainland and 600 Hong Kong. So eventually we'll all get to go to mainland China. Japan, access 3 years ago, 16 containers first year, 165 last year. This year we'll do over 500. Japan's a mature market. They like the sweet taste of Australian grapes. That's why they've gone that way. Korea, on the other hand, is not so much so. They look at, they buy on sight, not by taste. Korean chili grapes are dark green. Our grapes are slightly amber in colour because of sweetness, and therefore they're reluctant. But having come back from Korea last week, they're changing their attitude. But that's also, there's downsides. Vietnam, we lost Vietnam. It was a $32 million market for us. We lost it last year. Every commodity lost it last year. We were the first ones to get it back, but we're about 20% down. So it's going to be a lot of work to get that market up. So at the end of it, growers, even though we've got access to nearly every country in the world, bar Russia because everyone's banned, it's still a long process to educate the growers and to make sure that they do the right thing. Japan is my next big worry. I send out 10 emails a year on Japan to say, make sure you do MRL testing. Because if there's one breach or 3 breaches of MRLs in Japan, the whole industry has lost the trade, not just that grower. So there's ongoing work, an education process to make the grower, if you like, become, we keep on saying, export ready, but that is an ongoing process. So even though we've had success and our industry is, as he said, $330 million, this year we'll do $350 million in export alone. So it's a huge success for our industry, but there's still a lot of work to maintain it.